Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome. We have a great webinar for you today about 3 steps on how to make your ERP system evaluation and projects painless and effective. And we'd like to inform you that this webinar is being recorded. Please feel free to use the Q&A chat for any questions. And let's jump into it because I think we have a number of people who've joined already. So I'd like to start off by saying I'm from Mint Management Technologies, and we create tomorrow by inspiring our employees, clients, partners, and our community to reach their full potential through the innovative technology solutions that we provide. Mint is a fully integrated cloud partner. We offer end-to-end solutions across all 3 Microsoft clouds, and we are very pleased and excited to be here today to take you through some pretty cool stuff. So firstly, I'm Nikki Isherwood. I'm the Head of Business Development for ERP. I've been in the ERP software industry for 25 years, hence the grey hair. And my experience is in assisting organizations to evaluate and select ERP systems. I've seen how companies have gone through the confusion, the effort, the pain that they need to take on this journey to understand and evaluate their technology systems. And that's why I'm very keen to share my experience with you today.
And hi, I'm Eric Hall. I work for SEER, and I'm Partner Success Director. Like Nikki, I've, as you probably tell from the bullhead, I've been around the ERP sector since the mid-90s, involved with a whole raft of different types of implementations and projects across many different industry sectors. So hopefully we can assist you with your process.
Thanks, Eric. So I wanted to start off just talking a little bit about a personal experience and how has technology changed our lives. And my experience of customer service changed completely when I was held up at gunpoint in my house. And please don't panic, I'm not permanently scarred for life. I am a South African and a SAFA at that. So I did survive the experience. But the result of a night of no sleep, combined with the panic and the anxiety and the adrenaline that went through that experience, left me exhausted. And the next morning, the reality is you have to deal with a whole bunch of stuff. I had no ID. I had no laptop. I had no cell phone. I had no cash. I had no bank cards. Where do you start? And I was very fortunate that my mother came through and helped me, and she drove me off to the bank to go get all of these things done. But normally you'd have to start at the police station. You'd have to go get an affidavit. You potentially would need multiple affidavits to submit because many companies and organizations want an original. Then you've got to go and stand in a queue, and you've got to wait until somebody's able to serve you. And then there's a whole bunch of forms you need to fill out. Sometimes you have to wait for the bank manager. Then I have to pay for a new card. I don't have any cash. I don't have any money. That's part of the problem. I need to be issued with a new card. So how do I get through this whole process? If you're lucky, you will get issued a new card then. Otherwise, you have to come back later or even weeks later to get a new credit card. So how did data and technology change this process for me? Well, I got to the shopping center before the banks opened, stood in the queue. I was number 1 in the queue. I'll never forget. I kept that little number 1 slip that I got for that day. And I walked up to the lady sitting at the counter. I sat down and I said, this is what's happened to me. And instead of going through all the paperwork and getting started with all of that, she looked me in the eye and she said, are you okay? And can I get you a cup of tea? That shifted everything for me. The technology allowed her to be a human and show kindness and empathy to me scan my fingerprint, and get everything else done in the background while she had a cup of tea with me and was just there with human compassion. That changed customer service for me forever. And I will be a client forever because of that experience. So for me, that was a very personal journey on how technology shifted my interaction and my personal experience. So some people have chosen to ignore the future of technology, like my mother, who went with me that day. However, most of us are in a constant state of shock and amazement, trying to keep up with it. It keeps evolving, it keeps changing. Many years ago, in an article in Popular Electronics, there was a statement that said IBM bringing out a personal computer would be like teaching an elephant to dance. IBM was so focused in the 1980s on the mainframe solutions that they had and that business plan that they couldn't combine the execution with exploration and innovation at that point in time. So you can ignore the future all you want, but it just keeps coming. So these are a couple of interesting statements that I've seen over the years. I won't name and shame any of these players, but no way will some online database replace your morning paper. That was said in 1995. E-commerce is a false promise. It's not even technically feasible. In 2001, I mean, in today's day and age, I'd die without e-commerce. Most of my shopping is done online. How is it even possible that we weren't able to predict that this would be a reality? Next one. There's no chance the iPhone will gain market share. No chance. That was said in 2007. I think we're all having a good chuckle about that one. And no serious enterprise will ever trust their data to the public cloud. And that was said in 2012, not that long ago. So we can all ignore the future as much as we want, but clearly it doesn't care. And that's what we're going to do now. We're going to draw a line through the disruptions of the past, and there are 4 major disruptions. And we're busy moving into the 5th one now. So I'm going to describe to you how these play out and how we as technology consumers can get ahead of this and understand what it means for us. So if we have a look at in the past, we started off with the first major era of technology was an analog era, and that was in the 1980s, and it started with the big mainframes. And part of the reason I was so interested in that is that my father worked for the first government mainframe installation in South Africa. So it's very personal to me that that was set up in Pretoria, and I remember this huge building with these massive rooms with these big mainframes in them and the corridors with those green linoleum floors that you find in hospitals. And I still remember my dad would hook his fingers like this and I'd catch on and I would go skiing up and down these passages. But the reality is that in that mainframe era, the intents were for big, cumbersome, boring jobs to be done. It was payroll, it was accounting. The only way that you could get access to these machines was by driving all the way through to Pretoria to that big government building and accessing those mainframes in those buildings. They were designed for large organizations that needed huge computing skills, and they were not accessible. So if we look at the 1980s, during the 1980s, PCs were invented. They were there. But to those statements that we made, they weren't taken very seriously. In fact, IBM and Sun Microsystems laughed at the PC industry and they said that it wasn't a possibility. But in the 1990s, PCs suddenly came along. 10-year-old technology, it had been there, but all of a sudden it became accessible to all of us. And we moved from this boring mainframe stuff to what PCs could do that provided us with more opportunity. It gave us the ability to start doing things at home that were never possible before. We could build CVs, we could build budgets, we could do our homework. And it was accessible through us ordering discs. And for those of you in South Africa listening today, yes, in those days, the postal service worked and we received our discs through the post. And I still had my PC with the 2 floppy drives, GW Basic in the one and MS-DOS in the other, but we could install software on our PCs and we could use them. The challenge with the PCs at that point in time was that they were individual machines and they were not yet connected. But what technology started in the 1990s that wasn't available to us as consumers? Connection, the World Wide Web. So the World Wide Web was 10 years old by the time the 2000s came around. But all of a sudden, it gave us the ability to start connecting to each other. The technology had been there, it just took 10 years for it to become accessible to the public. And this opened up a whole new option of problems to solve. Not only were the machines accessible, but they were now created. And if you think about the applications that we could use in the 2000s through the web that were not available to us when we had PCs, there were, you couldn't have had a Facebook or a dating app when you only had your own PC. Who were you going to connect with? People in your family. I couldn't very well date my mom or my brother or my sister. The reality is we now had a host of new potential problems that were available to us to solve. Who drove all of these new applications? And that's where I'm starting to look at what is the trend here. In the 1980s, we had the mainframes. The 1990s, 10 years later, we had the PCs. In the 2000s, the web came in. So web developers or developers stopped developing applications and started developing web applications. How do you stay ahead of what the next era is going to be? Start watching the developers. They are building for the next generation of what's coming from a technology point of view. So during the 2000s, we were able to find information. We were able to use online information where we could share, we could buy things, we could date other people. And all of this was available to us by typing into a browser. You just go and look for it and you can find the information. But what shifted? What happened in the 2000s that was coming next? And that for us was really around the mobile accessibility. So the web allowed us to access information and go and fetch information, but all of a sudden, what happened and changed when the mobile era came in? And Eric, you have some experience around your shift into this next era.
Yeah, sure. And I think it's worthwhile talking about the human element associated with this, because if you look at the change from the 80s through to the 2010s, the way that we accessed information has changed significantly. So, back when I was at school in the 1980s, if I want to go and find something out about something, I had to go to the library. Now, within the 2010s of that, the advent of the mobile phone and online databases, I don't have to go anywhere. I can do it from the comfort of my sofa. So this has changed the way that people want to interact with each other, interact with organizations. So this is business to consumer and a business to business level, and also then the way that they want to be treated. And the net effect of that is that if you pick up your mobile phone and you can't get access to something and you can't demand that information, because that's principally what we're all doing, and then you can self-serve so you can make your decisions about the journey that you want to take. People turn away, people walk away, they get bored very, very easily. And I think that's one of the biggest shifts that we've seen, is the human element associated with the development of technology. Okay, Nikki?
Yeah. And if you consider it, in the 2020s, I did a lot of sales activities driving around. I had to take up my old MacBooks and look up where I was going to go. What the mobile device gave us was a complete shift in terms of real-time data being anywhere. All of a sudden, I have Google Maps. I have Uber. It can find me where I am and deliver the information to me. And the reality is, prior to the mobiles, we didn't think this was going to be a real thing. Now take a mobile away from anyone and life is impossible. And we also thought that would be our go-to forever. It was never going to shift. It was never going to change. But the reality of where the 2010s ended was that the resolution of these intents got much easier. We were able to install an app, and this app was able to understand where we are, what we're looking for. You don't go and look up your soccer scores. You install an app that sends the information that you are most interested to you. And this is why the App Store took off so phenomenally, because it was just better than you having to go and look up what you needed and what you wanted. So if we look at the mobile era, how could things get more sophisticated? What could be more sophisticated than you picking up your phone and saying, hey, I want to do this, and then the app goes off and connects to a system or service and figures out the possibilities and brings it back to your phone and says, okay, now you can scroll through. What's easier than that? Well, what's easier than that is magic. The machines figuring out what we want for us. And that moves us into the era of autonomy. And that's what I call the era that we're currently in. If we consider what this means to us, is we had the web, we had the mobile phones, but the era of autonomy is based on data. There are extensive terabytes of data stored all over the web, and all over the cloud. And cloud computing suddenly allowed all this data to connect, because we have data sitting in Brazil and we have data sitting in Nigeria, and these two pieces of data could be directly related. But me as the average human being can't explore that. I don't have the insight. But we've now built machines that have the ability to look across all of this data and send information back to us. And again, take a 10-year leap and look at what the developers were doing. The developers started building cloud applications that could consolidate and share information and data. And if you look at where we are now in the 2020s with AI and ChatGPT, we're accessing data across extensive ranges of information and consolidating and presenting it back for ourselves. And this era of autonomy happens in the wild. You out there, wherever you are, information can come to you. We never thought the mobile phone was going to go away. Well, what am I wearing? Devices that automatically know where I am, what I'm doing. I walk onto the golf course. I don't have to tell my device which golf course I'm on. It automatically knows which golf course I'm on, and I can track my golf score. It even can tell from how many times I've hit, although that's a scary option for me. And I do sometimes forget to add my own score in, and it puts its own score in, which is not a good idea for me. But the reality is we have wearable devices. We have self-driving cars. How does a self-driving car do what it does? Because everything we do while driving a car has been reduced to data. Data is the most important thing we have in our lives today. It's completely shifted the way businesses are run, the way we experience our lifestyle in social and economic settings. Data has driven our entire life since the early 2020s and 2010s. And this is what I'm trying to show you is how do we go through from one era to the next and understand and predict the future. And I think if you look at where the developers are right now, everything is around AI, extending the automation, and we're ultimately going to be in a position where our homes can run ourselves completely autonomously. They can check the pH level in your swimming pool, automatically understand what adjustments need to be made, place the order online from the pool shop with the correct pH levels and whatever it is you need to add to your pool, have it delivered, and you can just pop it in your pool and off you go. It's quite phenomenal in terms of how this has all shifted. So this is my story about understanding the past, the present, and the future. And I'd really like to thank James Whitaker. He's a technology evangelist, and he opened up my mind to understanding and predicting the future through his presentations that he's done around watching what the developers do and where they're coming from next. So I hope that set the tone for today in terms of how we need to continuously stay up to date with technology and what that means for us.
Thanks, Nikki. And it becomes a bit of an interesting dichotomy because if you take that journey that we've all been on, we're all aware of the presence of AI across our personal lives and our business lives, that autonomy is becoming right at the heart of everything. Why is it still so difficult to actually select the systems that we need to be able to run our businesses? Well, what's actually happened is if you look at that journey, going back to the path that Nikki's just described, and go back to the 90s and the noughties, you would rely on people coming telling you what the art of the possible is. And they would sit in front of you and they would show you how it works. And you go, okay, yeah, fine, great, that sounds good to me. All right, let's move on. Now we're bombarded with information. We can go and research anything. We don't need a salesperson to sit in front of us and tell us how good the system is. We can do our own assessment behind all of that. But because it's opinion based, it doesn't necessarily mean it's giving us the right advice that we need at that point in time. So we take a leaf out of the developers' books, and what we need to look at is how can we do this in a more scientific manner. So we can move on to the next slide, please. So the questions that you have if you're looking at a replacement system of any type, we're here talking about ERP, is there are fundamental questions that need to be answered that can't be solved by just going and having a look on Google or Bing and doing some research or pointing ChatGPT to an answer. How do you know, for instance, that you've captured all of your requirements? How do you go about that? We've been IT people for a long time, and it's difficult for us, let alone yourselves who are not in IT. The building of a business case. How do we actually take this idea that we've got, this concept that we've got, and how do we put some structure around that to say that we can go to the board and say, right, here's the investment that we need to make, and here's the return that we're going to get on that investment. There are tons of products out there, and technology is advancing at an awfully fast pace. There are startups. So, for instance, across Europe, a product called Zero went from a standing start in 2008, 2009, something around that, to being pretty much the most popular small business solution around for the 1 to 2 user. Because you switched it on, off you go, all cloud driven, and you're up and running in no time at all whatsoever. How did it actually go from there? And where do I go from choosing something that, based on my requirements, which brings us round to this next point, is how do I ensure that it's going to do everything that I need it to do? How much is it going to cost me? How long is it going to take to implement? Because just the cost of buying a solution and the consultancy that goes along with it is not your budget. Your budget also is the impact that it's going to have on the business. And the longer that it takes, the greater the impact that it has on your business. And then who do you choose? Who do you partner with? How do you make sure that organization has got the skill set to be able to deliver you what you want? And this whole process that you go through to actually answer these questions, I think Nikki's going to dive into in a little bit more detail to go through that, is a time-consuming exercise. Over to you, Nikki.
Yeah, so in my experience and working with companies over the last 20 years, I've seen this painful journey of people starting with, identifying that they need a new system. That's great. Okay, we need a new system. So we start asking around and we start looking for more information, and we like, all right, there's a few options out here. Who's responsible for deciding on those options? Where do we go? Then we start driving into system demonstrations. I've heard about this, I've heard about that. Okay, let's start with system demos. This is time consuming. You need to get a group of people in a room. They need to sit down. They need to evaluate it. The finance person has a different objective to the warehouse manager, to the shop floor manager. But, eventually you get to a point where you're like, okay, this looks good. This looks good. So let's start moving around in that. And we suddenly realize, hold on, budget's an issue. We don't have as much budget as we thought we were going to have, or is this product too expensive? Okay, let's relook at the budget. Now we're going to go back and look at more demos. Then Fred went to a braai over the weekend. For those of you that are not South Africans, a braai is a barbecue. And you know how that goes. Fred's got a mate and he says you have to look at this solution. You get taken completely off track. Now we're going to go down this road. No, hold on, we're going to go down that road. A couple of years ago, completely unexpectedly in the middle of all of this, we had a global lockdown. Who saw that coming? And eventually you get taken off track from that. You get back on track and you get to the point where the board needs to approve and you suddenly realize you don't have the full business case. You go back to the drawing board, you fix all of that, then you come back to the board, and hopefully at that point in time, you can get approval and move into your implementation. And this is typically what I've seen happen over the years. There is no quick and easy solution. So what I'm going to show you is how we use people, process, and technology to simplify this whole journey. And we do that in 3 painless steps. So the first step for us is around qualification, and that's understanding from a high-level point of view, what is your budget and what functionality do you need? What modules will support this need from a high-level perspective? Once you've established that, you can then move on to gathering more detail, putting together a scope and a terms of reference and some more detailed costs, understanding what the long-term return on investment is and where do you go from here. And then the last portion I'm going to speak about is how do you speed up that implementation? When Eric spoke about Xero, sure, it takes you 1 or 2 days to get up and running as a single user site, but most organizations in our market space are looking for something a lot more comprehensive that needs to align to your business rules, your requirements, your reporting, your analytics. There's a lot more effort that goes into that implementation, and how do we alleviate that? So we're going to start off with the high-level budget. And while we do that, we're going to launch a poll for you to look at how long did it take you to evaluate large system replacements in your organization, because this is a very real cost associated to your effort. Forget about all the service providers' effort and time that they've put into this, but your effort internally. You potentially have allocated someone to go off and do this initial investigation for you, put together some high-level requirements. They then need to interact with multiple people in the organization, gather information, consolidate it, go back to different service providers, provide the information, ask for feedback. And, in my history, my longest sales cycle for somebody looking to replace a system has been 12 years. For 12 years, they went back and forth, not being able to decide how, which system to select. And the time and effort that went into that was extensive. So what we offer now is what we call a qualify. So qualify the solution. 5 to 10 minutes, not much longer than it took you to fill in the poll. We have an assessment available that allows you to put in key information, and out of that, we are then able, through the algorithms that we've built into the background, based off 50 years of experience across multiple people who've pulled it together, to give you a report and an output with some valuable feedback. So in this report, I think the first thing that's most important is giving you a high-level sense of what an implementation could cost you. If I think back over the years, I'd go and see people, and the most common question is, what is this going to cost me? And in a first engagement, when I don't understand the requirements, I don't understand the detail, I look at people and I say, well, how long is a piece of string? I just don't know at this point in time. But by gathering this information, using the insights that we've built over the years, we're able to give you a high and a low estimate. And even though it could be quite broad at this point in time, it does tell you how long that piece of string could be. And in addition to that, it also gives you some detailed information around the licensing and what that cost could be and what modules are potentially best suited to your requirement. So this is our first step. 5 to 10 minute assessment to help clients kick off the process and understand where they're playing. If this is the wrong solution for you, you can move on and get on to something else. But if you think it's within the ballpark and the reach of where you want to go, that'll work for you. So the next one for us is step 2. Now that you understand where you're going, we want to start looking at what the details look like. There's a lot of requirements that need to be captured. And to Eric's point earlier, we have consultants that don't necessarily ask every single question every single time. There's a lot to remember. How do we get into these details with a salesperson that are going to give us what we need? So we use something called proactive discover. And this simplifies, standardizes, and automates the business application evaluation activities. It's repeatable, it's predictable, it's consistent, and it can give you an accurate outcome. It combines the technology, people, and process through the carefully designed process to de-risk the journey. So what does this give us? It reduces our risk as clients. It cuts costs because there's less time, effort, and energy spent on it, and it reduces your time to value. And all of this without compromising on quality because of the standardized environment. So Claire's going to run a poll for us to understand what your experience was of evaluating systems. And while we're running the poll, Eric's going to take over and he's going to give us a demonstration of our Proactive Discover platform that helps us capture all of these requirements.
Okay, thank you, Nikki. So first point I want to make is that, and I slightly alluded to this earlier on, is that when we look at gathering the requirements, we've got to take a scientific approach to it. So the old way, if I want to call it that, was you would book a whole bunch of workshops, a consultant, probably multiple consultants would come in and they would sit with you for days on end, talking through your requirements, asking you questions. You wouldn't necessarily have the answer to all those questions. So you go away and you do a bit of research and then be updated. And then what would happen, the consultant, as they're actually going through this, will be taking notes. Now, whether that was pen and paper, that was OneNote, whether that was a spreadsheet, all variations are used. Then the process would happen once those workshops are finished to actually go away, and they would then go and write all of that up. And that document would then normally be huge, be massive, on 100 pages. And they would issue to you and then ask you to say, right, can you confirm that's what you want? If you're looking at that going, what? I don't understand what half of these things actually mean. How am I going to sign all of this off? And you know what you do then? You put a delay on it because it's a big decision. It's going to cost a bunch of money. So you then say, right, let's now go back and analyze this. Also, going back to what I said about the ability to be able to people requiring on-demand self-service capabilities, they want to be in control of the process. So what the Discover process gives you is, if you see the screen, I'm going to start from the left-hand side and work across. It's split into 3 areas. Excuse the logos. This is just standard demonstration environment. So Enabler is the partner, Goldlark is the customer, if you want that within there. But on the left-hand side, we've got our project and business overview section. In the middle, we've got our functional requirements, and on the right-hand side, we've got our software license requirements. So if I start over on the left-hand side, this is all stuff that, and I'm going to be completely honest, is not necessarily captured by the functional consultants and isn't always captured by your sales consultants. So therefore, these bits tend to get left out, but these are fundamental to building your business case. So first thing is, who are you? What locations you operate out of? How many legal entities you've got? And these are very simple to answer. These are just text fields that you just go in and complete the information. If you're unsure about an answer, you can just delete it. You can clear the answer and go back in again. You can leave it blank, and it will keep a record of where you're up to within that process. I'll flick through to some of the other areas that we're covering here. Things like your project objectives. So these are key questions that you need to be able to answer, to be able to articulate why you're in the market to start off with. And we expand out on that further down within the section. What approach do you want to take? What does your project team look like? What reporting requirements do you have? What are your goals? What are your KPIs? What are the pain points that you're hitting? So in all of these, there are questions that will drive the structure of your project approach and why, as an organization, you're engaged in this process. There are other type of answer options within here. So for instance, if I pull down the interfaces one, and as I said, we're not necessarily requiring you to answer all of this all in one go, is that this is what's known as a grid section. So basically you go in here and you fill in the answers to the question. And what we do is we provide you with a whole raft of help text that enables you to understand the reason why we're asking the question at this particular point in time. So that's the business and project overview. And really that then will drive one of the outputs which Nikki will describe to you, which is the structure around how the project is being approached. If I look at then the functional requirements, what we're trying to do here is, and we structured this based on the type of organization that you are. So if I go into here and I can see everything here, you'll see on the left-hand side, there's different areas of functionality. So for instance, finance, sales, warehousing, manufacturing, so on and so forth. Now, it might be that you're a professional service-based organization. You don't hold any kind of stock at all whatsoever. Well, that's great. We just remove that section. I'm showing you, not everything here because some of these go an awful lot longer, but I'm showing just some of the key areas. And then what we ask you to do is to, for each requirement, rate it based on the Moscow scale. And the Moscow scale is quite simple. M is you must have it. Forget the O. And then the S should, and the should is, yeah, I think that's something that we need. It's not necessarily a day one minimum viable product requirement, but it is something that we'll need. Could is more of then your nice to have. It would be good. It would be all right if we had that, but we don't do it now, or we don't have it now, so we're not going to use it. And then you've got your not, which is you are definitely not going to require this. We also have on here as an unsure, and what this gives us availability actually as you go through here, all you're doing is ticking a box. That's it. And what we provide for you, for instance, if I go into finance there and look at chart of accounts, if I just hover over any of these little icons, it gives me an explanation of what that question is asking. We also have the ability to be able to capture notes as to why you've put something as either a must, should, or a could, so that they can be reviewed and they can be included in the output documentation as well. What we also enable you to do is to break this down so that your subject matter experts within your organization, so for instance, if you have someone who looks after your warehousing and your inventory, they would just answer the question on warehousing and inventory. That's it. They wouldn't see anything else. So we structure it so that it's not overwhelming, and literally people are focused on the areas that are their expertise. The net effect of this is this rolls up completely into a scientifically captured set of requirements. And trust me, as I said, I've been in the ERP business for a little while. And if you sit doing a workshop, unless you have some form of cheat sheet, you will not remember to ask everything. What this enables the consultants to do, and you as a customer as well, is to be able to look at this and properly go through, because these are all business requirements. These are not aligned to a system. These are requirements that are there that we've captured over many, many years of experience of an ERP implementation. So we go back up to the top up here, and I go back to the front page. So you see here, we keep a structure behind this of how many must have been answered, should, coulds, nots. How many unsure? What we'd expect then is that we would sit down and we would work with you and we'd go through why you're unsure of that. And we would then do a review at the end of this, where we would look at everything that's in there as a must, and we would verify that that is actually the case. Because what this will then drive is, it will drive a set of requirements, it will drive an estimate for you, it will drive a timeline for you, and give you all of that documentation in an automated manner. What we can also do as well is, if there's something that is specifically to your requirements, we can capture it in the customer requirements section. We can also do that across your document layouts. You can also do that across your data migration and all the structure behind all of that. So we can pull together the entire project landscape. Then the other bit that Microsoft likes to keep as simple as possible, now, Nikki, is the license engine. And what we do here is we literally take you through a wizard. So all you do, and we explain exactly the process that you're going through. So what's the total number of users that you're going to have in the system? Out of those, how many of those are going to be shared using an individual machine? So for instance, if that was picking and putting away in a warehouse, or if that was related to a commerce function, a till, a point of sale. And then how many of those only need a light touch? How many of those are actually full users? And then there are two bands with this particular Microsoft license structure. But we explain the functional areas that will come into play if you need the higher level capabilities versus the lower level capabilities. Once again, making sure that you're not being quoted or you're not paying for licenses that you don't need. And trust me, this has taken a while to put together, but on top of this takes a while for salespeople, pre-salespeople, and partners in general to be able to get their head around. And then when they do, Microsoft changed the rules. So we have to be on the ball with this completely. And we built this into this engine so that we can drive you through it. So once that's done, then that will actually give you your license profile, and that will be then part of the output documents. So on that, if I go back to the, there we go, it has redirected me, there we go. The final stage of this, once you've completed it, it's submitted for review, you can then generate the report. And I'm going to hand back to Nikki, and Nikki's going to take you through the output documents that you would expect. You're on mute, Nikki.
Thanks, Eric. I think on the Microsoft licensing comments, people have often said to me, why don't you have an MBA? And I said, I've been doing Microsoft solutions for so many years. That's all I do. I just study new licensing guides. But ultimately, what we get out of the Discover process is an output report that details all that information. We have an executive summary, and it includes, and it's auto-generated. So it's not like it takes us weeks of time and effort to get this out for you. It's very quick and seamless. It gives you the percentage fits, and it starts documenting everything that we're looking at, from your costing through to your functional requirements that must, could, should fit, the gap fit analysis, and you have something tangible you can, number one, use internally within your organization to discuss your requirements with your stakeholders, as well as take externally if you're looking for somebody else to give you a comparative price on this. So what are the outputs of our Discover process where we can assist you? It can be facilitated by our consultants, or it can be self-completed by yourselves. But ultimately, we get the first initial report with your modules and a terms of reference or a scope of work, if you want to call it with that. It gives you a gap fit analysis, and this is critical because we all want a solution that can do everything. I always, when I'm presenting to people, I say, everybody's seen a Tom Cruise Mission Impossible movie, and you just swipe this and that, and all sorts of magic things happen. We can make anything happen, but at what cost? So you want a gap fit analysis to understand what is standard functionality that you can leverage, and where are the gaps in terms of what you're looking, and what is that percentage fit? Along with the report that we produce, you also get a proposal. And the proposal includes a high, medium, and low project implementation estimate, or a rough order of magnitude investment that is based on that Moscow principle. And what that allows you to do is also break it out into a phased approach. You can start off with a phase one being a minimum viable product to say, let's get up and running. Let's do this as quickly as possible. We want to start getting a return on our software before we do all the bells and whistles. In the olden days, and yes, I was part of the olden days, we used to do a whole system implementation that took anything from a year to 3 years. By the time you've implemented it, the requirements have changed. We don't look at systems that way anymore. We want to get up and running as quickly as possible. And then we want to take the should and the coulds, reprioritize those at that point in time, and start implementing incrementally or enhancing the system as quickly as possible. And then over and above that, as Eric indicated, you have a license fee estimate. Licensing is extremely complex in the Microsoft environment, and with us having built in the rules that say if you want to do this type of feature or functionality and transaction in the system, that is the license that's required. And you need those costs up front to understand. But do you want to give your board or your executives the 170-page report plus a 20-page proposal? No, you're looking for an executive summary deck, and boom, we produce that for you as well. So 3 great outputs in terms of this process and this journey. And then once you've made your final decision, we move to the last step of our 3-step journey, and you want to kick off your implementation. And this is where we have the next level of automation, leveraging that process, technology, and people. So if we want to do a quick poll at the moment, Claire, if you can pop up the next poll for us. And it's really around understanding how much time you've spent internally on getting through this process and how many people you had to involve. So while we're evaluating, there's a lot of engagement with your subject matter experts in the organization. And then once we've done the evaluation, guess what? We kick off with an analysis. And what do? We want everybody back in the room. And we go through the whole process again. What is the point in doing that? And what Eric showed you is our Discover platform. And what we have the ability to do is to start future-proofing this new system, because we have a new platform now that can leverage what we've already completed and go through everything systematically. Every single question is in there. Every point that we need is covered. And it can happen, we can speed up the time of the implementation because we're drawing on key information that was already captured in the previous process and rather validating through our analysis as opposed to starting from scratch. It gives your team flexibility as well. We have access to the environment where people can, on their own time, complete certain sections. And then that reduces our workshop effort and time. Multiple users can access the system. It also gives them clarity in terms of understanding the capabilities of the system through the question and answer and the demonstrations. And what do we want to achieve at the end of the day? We want to get this project right the first time and on budget. We don't want to extend the project because we misunderstood a requirement or something like that. So what is the new version from after evaluation into analysis look like? We utilize our portal, we transfer the requirements, we validate the details thereof, we save time in the planning at the beginning of the project, the setting up of the workshops, the attending of the workshops, pulling multiple subject matters out of your business from their day-to-day job to sit through the same Q&A that we've had previously. Travel time to get everyone together in a room, make sure that everyone's there and can consolidate and verify the information. Just completely unnecessary energy spent on the analysis when you've been through a very similar process in the evaluation. So we open up the portal for you, we run through that with you. What it also allows us to do is to start auto-configuring the basic requirements. We've been talking about technology all through the session. We're looking for automation. We're looking for system-driven approaches to reduce our effort. It helps speed up the implementation process. It can also auto-generate our design documentation. It reduces those hours and hours of sitting typing it up. And to Eric's point, you know, somebody's written it here, somebody's got it on OneNote there. It also helps build out our Azure DevOps environment to manage your project automatically from the system. This takes hours off the project manager's time and effort to sit and capture this. And the shared DevOps site is pretty much pre-populated from the analysis phase, including all the tasks that you need to manage during the build and testing and go live of your technology deployment project.